मरुची अवल जून है साल 2023 मात के गए अरमान जान वती मास्टर गिफ्ट मरुची हमसे अरमान जान ची यूनिवर्सिटी है मी याक बाहर है दा और हमसे तो का क्रांतरा मरने तो का हमें ची को università teze che università che ne हमसे बारीगा चेक करते بلاد پروفسور نشته شما تیمی تیزا معرفی کننده چاره باره چون کابیت دیگه منتظر آرمان دهانی یونیورسیتی همه سیکشنی که آرمان درس وانیده Chalmers University. Arman Dehani درسی چیه بارگه مزنی کشتی هستا شان لوجستیک مانجمنت بارگه تی ماستری گفته مروچی امشیه معرفی
Man kan väl slänga iväg något, alltså den kan ju vara med som någon...
Nej men jag ser att det skulle kunna vara...
यहाँ हम ऑयल प्लेटफॉर्म है के मज़ने अब किश्ती आप तो का तो नहीं मज़ने रो ऑयल हम चीज़ें बारे का चेब का पार्टकोल में kan तो पक बिकाशी तो बेबार तो मैंने चीज़ें
Då har inte ätit lunch, så. Det var lunch. Ha? Ja,
Hallå, hallå.
Det här är Ragnar.
हमशेदा बात करेंगे अरमान शवती कारण लोटा चेक मुआरफी भी करना अरमान और अरमान जान अरमान संगत कास्पर Arman professore poi di che ci student anche vorrei ci sto che sta darsi avanti المثاني كاري ياك بناي كتاب تقريبا نوشته وشي ياك شي ساينسي شي توكا شاب بيتي كارش أبتاد صفحة أشتاد نشوف وشتيش
the responsible person for the MPMR program. So that is basically also why I'm actually in charge of this presentation seminar. After the presentation held by Casper and Arman, we will have a small short break with cinnamon buns and coffee. So if you would like to join us, you are most welcome. So I will not will hold Casper and Arman. So the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Hello everyone and welcome to this master's thesis presentation. My name is Casper Hagerström and this is my dear friend and colleague Arman Dahani. We will go through our thesis that is the correlation between psychological safety, group development and safety culture within the maritime industry.
And in the agenda for today we will start by going through the aim of the study, followed by the introduction, background, theory, and then the methods and the limitations, as well as the results, discussion and conclusion, as well as some final words at the end. So the main core of this project was to contribute to this research area with data that has not previously been generated. And secondly, the idea with this project was also to emphasize the importance and the nature of this aspect that we are about to study. And next, we also wanted to use the theoretical background and our results to question things and to provoke debate within the maritime industry, as well as within the academic community about this topic. And finally, we wanted to use our findings to highlight the links, the discovered links between these three aspects. So, we will start by mentioning the fact that this study was conducted on the behalf of the READO 2 research project, which stands for Recruitment, Equality, and Diversity Opportunities. And this is a collaboration between organizations and...
And as Lauren Bacall once put it, standing still is the fastest way of moving backwards in a rapidly changing world. Accidents have occurred, and for as long as humans have been alive, and there are different accidents, and so are the occupational levels and the causes of those. And even though decades go by, or the fact that the evolution of civilization and technology continues and develops, and even though that procedures and protocols are followed, accidents do in fact still occur. And more often than not, these could potentially be linked to psychological safety, group development, and safety culture. Prior to the pandemic, leaders were portrayed as being viewed as tough and confident. However, those leaders were not the ones that actually saved the lives of millions of people during the COVID pandemic. Those who were portrayed as tough and confident leaders were such as Donald Trump and Jair Bolsonaro and the former Prime Minister of England, Boris Johnson. These leaders actually dismissed the COVID-19 virus, and they actually understated the importance of the wear and use of face masks as well as social distancing. That are the previous incidents that we think are worth discussing.
So to begin with, Murphy's Law states that anything that can go wrong will go wrong. And this is a very realistic perspective or perception to keep in mind when we go through these accidents. And it is also a very interesting way to describe the nature of risks and accidents. So moving on to the methods and the limitations. As for the data collection phase, we wanted to use a research approach that would be as appropriate and relevant to our research area and subject area as practically possible. Therefore, we decided to combine three questionnaires into one, meaning we created an integrated questionnaire out of the 3 different ones for each aspect then. I mean, one for each aspect. And for the data analysis phase, we decided to use 2 digital softwares as statistical analysis tools, which included Microsoft Excel, Excel's data analysis plugin, and SPSS. Whilst we used Microsoft Excel, we carried out a correlation analysis for the correlation between psychological safety, group development, and safety culture. And we did this in 2 different runs though. Whereas in SPSS, we did the same thing, but we viewed the correlation between all 3 at the same time. And we used the Pearson's correlation analysis for that. So by combining 3 different questionnaires, which were psychological safety questionnaire, group development questionnaire short, and scope PC, which represents safety culture aspect, or I mean it reviews the safety culture aspect. We created, in addition to 8 demographic questions, a questionnaire which consists
occupational
of
roles didn't matter, their ages didn't matter. It wouldn't matter if they're being students or interns, as long as they had maritime industry experiences. And as Arman mentioned earlier, the items that we had followed the Likert scale of 1 to 5. And this is all fine until negatively worded items is presented. Now, to put this into perspective, if a comment or an item or a question would come up and it would say, I do not feel safe offering new ideas in this group. That would mean if you score on a 5, it would mean that you're actually not psychologically safe. Whereas if you would score a number 1, it would mean, no, I have no problems with offering new ideas, and it would mean that you are psychologically safe. So therefore, such negative questions had to be identified, and we had to, as long as you are in the maritime industry, you could partake in this thing, because we will come back to later why we didn't care about, because we didn't actually redeem them as different sets of groups that we combined. We just wanted to see the general perception of what you think that your group is scoring, or what do you think you're psychologically safe, and how high of a level of safety culture that you possess, and not in comparison to different groups. So we just want to be clear with that. And now with that said, we will go into the results.
So we had 75 respondents return their surveys, amongst which 63% were males, 36 were females, and the 2 most common age groups were between 20 to a total, I mean, if you combine them, 20 to 39, where the ages of 30 to 39 were 30%, and 33% were those that were between 20 to 29. And it turned out that amongst these 75 respondents, 80% of them were of Swedish nationality, whereas the sum of all other nationalities and origins came up to the total percentage of 20%. And for the professional experience, it turned out that there were 3 groups that were, they were major groups, because as you can see, there were 25%, 23%, and 20%, and the range between all these was from 2 years to 15 years. And amongst these 75 respondents, the occupational roles that they had, we noticed that there were 2 major groups amongst these. We had the crews, people who worked as crew on land, that accounted for 63%, and we had the crews on board, which were 22%. And for team sizes, it turned out that if combined, the 2 most common team sizes was from 6 to 12 team members.
The Microsoft Excel, we calculated the 2 most important things that are the R value and the P value. Now, just to be clear, we performed a regression analysis that was crucial in order for us to get the p-value out. However, the regression analysis has nothing to do with the project in itself, except for actually just getting the p-values out. Now, once we're speaking about p-values, what we're looking for is that we want a p-value that is less than a 0.05. And if we get that, we could say that the correlation is statistically, it is statistically significant. And in the scientific cluster, we want to be 95% sure that something is not affected by the coincidences. And that means that we take on a 1 to 20 chance that we have a wrong answer. Whereas the multiple R values that you see on the screen indicates a level from +1 to -1. Now, this correlation, as closer it is to a +1, as closer it is to being a highly positive correlation. Whereas if the score is close to 0, you would have a complete scatter and it would not be correlated at all. Whereas a -1 would indicate that the correlation is strongly or statistically highly negative. Now, once you look at these numbers, what we can interpret is that we see from this, the multiple R for the correlation between psychological safety and group development is 0.852, which indicates that it's very near 1, indicating that it's a very highly correlated, positive correlation. For safety culture, it is nearly identical with 0.846.
And put it into a correlation scatter plot, which visualizes the correlation between psychological safety and group development, as well as the correlation between psychological safety and safety culture. And as you can see, the blue color represents the correlation between psychological safety and group development, and the red is for the safety culture, psychological safety and safety culture. As you guys remember, we mentioned the fact that the number of questions was very unequal for each, for all aspects. Therefore, we decided to use the percentage of each respondent's scoring for the maximum possible scoring within each aspect. So therefore, we would get a percentage that would mean that we had equalized the variations among these numbers. And what we can interpret from the scatter plot alone is the fact that it seems to follow what is considered to be a typical positive correlation. It is tilted upwards, and they're more or less concentrated within one area. I mean, along the line in that case.
And just to clarify that, as our R value shows, that it would mean that, for example, psychological safety, if it would move up 10 steps, it would follow this line on group development, respectively safety culture, by approximately 8.5 steps.
And what a positive correlation can be concluded as is, as one variable increases, so does the other. And this more or less reflects what Casper just said. And here we have the second correlation analysis, which was carried out in SPSS. And this was the Pearson's correlation analysis, where we analyzed all 3 aspects simultaneously. And as you can see, the red color, the values that are marked with red and blue are nearly identical to the previous ones. And the yellow represents the correlation that was identified between group development and safety culture. This was done more or less to validate our previous values that we had achieved from the normal correlation analysis. And what we want is that this value, which represents the sigma 2 two-tailed value, to be lower than 0.001. 0.01. And as you can see, there are far more lower.
Thank you, Casper and Arman. I thought it was a great presentation, easy to follow, and I really enjoyed reading your report. In general, I just have the impression that you've had a strong focus on validity and high quality, and it seems like you have been discussing a lot between each other how to approach this thesis, and I really enjoyed that you included that in the thesis. Yeah, and I would say it's also a core part of the learning process. One thing that I really appreciated is that I could see the thought line between all the chapters, and that you actually answered the research question in a good way, and you used the correct methods and everything. I thought it was really good. And I have some questions as well. One thing that I was thinking about,
some
I
type
know
of
that
further
you collected
research,
a lot of
which is something that we actually mention in our report, is that we cover these demographic aspects. I mean, mainly because we want to understand who has responded to the, given us this type of data. But the thing is that we also consider the possibility of, if time would allow, that we would try to identify specific patterns amongst the 75 people and see that, okay, it seems that, let's say, people who have less than they have 1 year or less when it comes to the experience levels, that they tend to feel that the psychological safety aspect is a lot worse. Whereas if you had the seniors, they tend to feel that psychological safety is very good. So in that sense, we would be able to identify specific patterns, and I think that's something that we could have done, but that was out of the scope, in some sense. But at the same time didn't allow us.
Furthermore, I think the biggest thing that we had that we did not have. I don't think that time maybe necessarily. Of course, we put all our efforts into this, and maybe time would have been, but that's not the biggest constraint. The biggest constraint is actually the lack of answers, that we do not have more than 75. Even though for our correlation right now, it is good, but looking at the subsections, at the subgroups, 75 is not enough.
Thus, the main idea was to specifically analyze the correlations, and as I said, if time would allow, that would be the difference. But the correlation was the main core idea of this study.
And then we also have in our report, we have disclaimers where we state that we need to have the demographics questions because we need to see where the people come from, and we need to kind of, if we want to or if we have to, we can allocate them to different subgroups or groups. But we also state that we will only handle this certain information if we have to and if it's necessary for a project. And the determination is that it is not necessary. We're looking at the correlation, and that is what we have performed.
So if we have had much more responses, then we could all dive into these very, very interesting questions that you mentioned. And hopefully there will be maybe a future for us to do that. Having said that, I would like to say something about being a supervisor. Being a supervisor and a teacher is about getting people to grow, getting people to learn. That's my job. And I must say that is what really has happened here. And you have grown and you have learned to an extent which I am surprised by. The growth and the development is rare. The level you have done is rare, and I'm very impressed by it. And you have worked extremely hard. So thank you for that. You gave me some praise earlier, and I'm grateful. However, I don't feel I deserve it. It's very simple. I'm just treating you as I would like to be treated myself. It's working together and co-working. And having said that, thank you so much.
Thank you.
So let's have a short 10 minutes break, and you can grab a cup of coffee in the end, or tea. I will see if there will be enough coffee.
Han har i början var det också kniv och kaffe, men nu äter han inte.
Tusen tack. Trevligt träff här faktiskt.
Jätteroligt.
Tack.
Varsågod.
Hej då! Hej då! Tack själv. Och vi ses. Vi hoppas vi kan träffa någon hemma. Då får ni svetta lite mer och ta lite starkare mat hemma. Detsamma. Jag tänkte att om du ska plugga master så väntade vi med att ge det. Det var onödigt.